for me as a coach, there was this first layer of it of like, okay, I've got to like live the impeccable life, or I've got to be the model. And then there's this layer beyond that where like I'm being the model and I'm modeling the breakdown of that impeccability. And that's actually another layer of possibility of leadership.
Toku McCree is an author, speaker, and coach focused on bringing Zen teachings to the world of business, leadership, and coaching. He trained for over 2 years as a Zen monk. Y'all know I love my monks. And his clients work with some of the world's top organizations, including Facebook, Google, the New York Times, United Talent Agencies, Nokia, and more. His writing and thoughts have been featured in the Huffington Post, Zen Habits, TEDx, The Change Blog, The Good Men Project, and Tiny Buddha. My name is Jessie Johnson. Welcome to the Success Sessions. I am so fucking honored and thrilled to share this brilliant conversation between myself and Toku. Toku and I have known each other for years. We deeply reconnected about a year ago and have just been playing all over the map in friendship, professional collaboration, referring each other. It's been incredible to get to know him. He is so deep, so reflective, so powerful in his teaching and his transmission, so honest, so authentic. And you are going to know what I'm talking about immediately because he shares his whole heart unapologetically in a way that only Toku can. I am real excited for you guys to tune in as we go deep into relationship paradigms, particularly romantic relationship and dating, as well as the connection of spirituality and work, toleration and freedom. We're talking about some big ideas in a way that I think everyone can make sense of. And I'm super honored to be here with you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hi, Toku.
Hey, Jessie, how's it going?
Great. How are you doing today?
Doing all right. Hanging in there. It's cold where I am, so it's always hard to be with cold is an interesting challenge.
Where are you right now?
Salt Lake City right now.
Uh-huh.
It's pretty though. The mountains are gorgeous, like with the snow on them.
Uh-huh. Just chilly.
Yeah, chilly, and I'm in a basement apartment, and so like with daylight savings time, it just has me be kind of like, yeah, I just want to like curl up in a blanket and just watch movies all day and not do anything else.
Why not do that?
I mean, this is like a question that comes up for me a lot, which is like sometimes doing what my sort of inertial energy wants me to do is actually good for me, and sometimes it's not at all, right? So like This morning I did a call and I was like really tired and I was like went back to bed and I woke up and I kind of felt like kind of depressed and crappy. And then I've been working for the past 3 hours and actually feeling really good. And so it's like,
how do you distinguish?
I kind of just want to lay around, but like, is that really actually what is actually going to be good for me and support my mood in the place I want to be in? And so, and talking to you, I'm feeling great. I'm like, this is great. I'm connecting with somebody. I'm feeling happier. So I'm like, oh, this is having a positive impact on my mood.
I just had the fantasy that you would have texted me before. I'm just imagining what it would have been like if you had texted me before and said, Jessie, I'm having one of those days where like I might really be excited to talk to you once I hear and see you, or I might want to cancel the call and go watch Netflix. Are you game to play that game with me? Like there is a level.
I would not let myself do that typically.
Yeah, it's like goes against all of our training around being professionals, I think. That for me,
our commitments, anyway. That we show up for our commitments unless there's like a really. Yeah, I mean there was a time I got a really bad night's sleep and I had a client at 7 a.m. on a specific time. And I said, I didn't get good sleep. I have to cancel our call. But that's rare. It's unusual. Usually I would just be like, I'll just wake up early and drink 2 cups of coffee and just like push through. But I was like, I cannot show up for this call in a way that's going to feel good. But it's so hard for me to know because sometimes I'm in like a really funky mood and I show up for the call and it's great. So I guess I would be more willing to do it with you because this feels a bit more optional, but it is a question like with a client, like what's my obligation to generate there in a particular way, right?
Well,
What,
I
what's
think
the obligation? Maybe what's my commitment to generate in a particular way?
right. I love that this is coming up because I feel like this is definitely going in the interview because I feel like there may be no one that I could speak to more transparently who has thought about this more deeply than you. Because what I think we're talking about is like, there's the commitment on the calendar and there's also the commitment to how we're showing up in the world. And so the question is, what do we do when there's a conflict between those commitments? Because in let's say the corporate world, or when I was teaching, for example, I had not actually, I might have made an internal, like tweak to like, I want to be joyful or I want to be generous or whatever. But that was not in my contract. My contract was to show the fuck up and be there when school started. Period. The end. There was no exception to that.
Yeah.
Even when we were sick, they like, I actually think that my administrators were pretty clear that we should not come to school, but I wasn't always. Like there was a huge cost if we didn't come. So now in the work that you and I are doing, where we're not only supporting our clients in the similar way that I supported my students, but we're also really modeling, like, I'm going to live in a way that matches the way I want to support you in living. I'm going to hold integrity with myself in a way that I want to support you. Like there's a higher standard, I think, around self-care, around alignment. And so I'm just really excited to hear you. I've been speaking a lot, so I want to hear your response.
Well, one thing is that my clients always imagine that I'm much more impeccable and like together. They always have this like, well, Toku, you lived at a monastery, so you must meditate 6 hours a day. I'm like, I get 30 minutes and I'm feeling good. So like they have this projection on you, which is interesting. So I try to really intentionally reveal my humanity as much as possible. And I'll just share. I remember I was working with Hans Phillips, right?
I know his name and we're friends on Facebook, but we haven't met yet.
Yeah. He's a really great guy. So he was my coach for about a year, and we were first coaching together. He like was talking about his marriage with me in this very open way. And it was really like I was super surprised by it. I was like, oh, it's kind of weird. And like, is he trying to get therapy for me? But I kind of didn't get what he was doing, but he was really modeling this form of leadership where he was being really vulnerable and honest about his humanity. And so it's sort of like this dual thing for me. One, I do try to live a kind of life that is a model for my clients, but then it's also really important for me to model my humanity and just be like,
yes,
yeah, like I've had this thing come up. I'm really triggered by it. I can put it aside for today's call, but I was like, that's the space I'm in. And here's what's hard for me about that. And so I think there's almost this like, for me as a coach, there was this first layer of it of like, okay, I've got to like live the impeccable life, or I've got to be the model. And then there's this layer beyond that where like I'm being the model and I'm modeling the breakdown of that impeccability. And that's actually another layer of possibility of leadership.
Well, and it's a mental tongue twister a little bit, but when I hear you talk about it, I feel like you're talking about elevating the impeccability. That it's like, it's not actually impeccable if it only looks impeccable. It's impeccable when it is impeccable. And sometimes that means that you cancel a call at the last minute and go watch Netflix instead. And sometimes it means that when you feel like watching Netflix instead, you say, no, I'm going to find my excellence in this moment. I'm going to find a source of love that is beyond me. I'm going to resource differently and follow through. And maybe that's what's coming through for me, is that what I think that you and I both, we're very different in many ways, but I think that the place where consistently I feel resonance with you is that we're both really dedicated to that resonance or that alignment, that we're not compromising in some way.
Yeah.
The essence of the thing that we're trying to create. And so it's like, well, people might not all like it, and that's okay. We're still dedicated to the thing itself.
I think that's authenticity. Authenticity is the word that comes to mind for me.
I'm a huge fan of that word. Let's rock with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that authenticity has a weird, people think about authenticity in a weird way, but I think what you're talking about is like really kind of a deep form of authenticity, which requires a certain sort of internal and external alignment, as well as like a deep internal honesty, as well as a willingness to be externally honest as well.
Oh, I love that. Authenticity. I'm hearing the definition of authenticity as an alignment between inside and out. Do you feel like that's what you just said?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of alignment and honesty. Those two things. Because you could have an alignment and be dishonest. I mean, say what you want about our current president. He's pretty aligned with himself.
I'm not sure I can, I'm interested in that example, but I'm wanting one that's closer to, yeah. Well, yeah, maybe, can you just give me another one?
So I have a friend who, I don't know, define him as a friend. He kind of drives me completely insane. He's really like, I think there's a way you can, I love this way you're kind of talking about like kind of being in alignment with like, I want to watch Netflix that feels kind of like good and in integrity. And there's a way you can be with that just has you feel like you are just super flaky and unreliable. And you're just good. You're like, you go with the wind and I can't trust you to do anything. So he has this very like, life is all about flow, and which is great. And he's super aligned with it. But my experience of him is not a deep amount of authenticity. And part of it is like, I don't feel him being particularly internally and externally. Well, he is sort of internally, externally aligned. I don't know if I fully trust his self-honesty.
Yes, I got it. That example helped me.
Yeah.
I think it may be a semantic thing, so I'm not sure I want to fight for this, but I'm just curious as we explore together if that isn't the external alignment, like if honesty isn't the external component. But I'm still chewing on it. What I like about this is that I think one of the things that I actually teach this part I've thought about before, is that when you're out of alignment, which happens every time we grow, like we're here, let's say, and we want to go here, but I'm separating my hands so you can see it. Like immediately we're thinking about things in the future. We're making plans for how to get there. We're doing all this stuff that isn't where we are. And so inevitably it creates this contrast that spiritual practice in general, I would say, would have us kind of like drop all that stuff and just be with what is. But when we're in the world creating, which is also spiritual, a different kind of practice, then we're inevitably thinking about the future. And when we're talking about changing our financial power, let's say, right? People come to me all the time. I think they come to you for the same reason. Like, I want to make more money. Immediately they feel the dissonance between their past experience and what they want to create. And that creates tension that they have to resolve. They have to resolve it. And they have two ways to do that. They can either give up on their dream, give up on their vision, change their vision, bring back the scale, the timing, whatever, or they can line up with it. Like, I'm gonna bring myself up. So, right, you have the impulse, like you're scheduled to talk with me. You have the impulse to watch Netflix, and you can do two things. And they're both equally legitimate options for getting in alignment. One is to watch Netflix. I don't know if I like my hand movements here, but let's I'm going to rock with it. Usually this is like,
I was thinking that this would be Netflix, but I'm like, okay, that's
like this is watching Netflix. And like the other is like, oh, that part that wants to watch Netflix, like how can I nurture, soothe, comfort, welcome that part in my conversation with Jesse? I want to say right now that part of the reason that I invited you onto this podcast interview, the Success Sessions, is because I see you as masterful and excellent at prioritizing that. It's not to say that you're perfectly aligned all the time, but just that you understand what it is to be aligned, and you understand what you are masterful at noticing when you're not. And it's because of that that you're such a powerful coach. because you can recognize it in others.
Thank you. Those are very kind words. Those landed. Can I complain about something you said before
Yes.
or disagree with it? I don't
Yes.
think spiritual practice has us be only in the present moment. I think that's a very limited definition of spiritual practice. And because
How do you think spiritual practice is connected to time?
Well, there's like both. I mean, I think you can talk about creating the contrast, but like I think that they're just, life is a paradox, right? And so there's either like acknowledged or unacknowledged paradoxes, and there's sort of empowered and disempowered paradoxes. And so like there is a natural paradox of I'm whole, complete, lacking nothing as the way I am, and I got a lot of work to do to become the Buddha, or become awakened, or become a successful coach, or make a lot of money. And that just is a paradox. And your ability to sit in the tension of that paradox is very important. But I don't think that spiritual practice is like, well, just forget about this thing over here completely. It's not about forget about it completely. It's about, okay, how can you sit in the paradox of that? I think there is a stage of spiritual practice and in being a coach that's just fully about arriving where you are. But I think if you end up there, and this is my complaint a little bit of like, people who are kind of the middle stage of 3Ps work, I don't know if you know 3Ps or not, but they get this idea of like, everything's thought. That's one of like a principles, like everything is thought. I'm like, that's great, but that like becomes just this, you can kind of just, you can destroy everything with that. I'm like, okay, that's true, right? Climate change, well, that's just a thought. Well, yes. And it's also true that the world's temperature is rising. We probably should do something about that, right? So there's this middle stage of practice like we can get stuck in where it's like about, it's all just about being right here, right? And I see coaches do this too, of like, when they get into a place of, well, it's just all like, I just got to listen. Like, I don't need to say anything in a coaching session. I just about being quiet. I'm like, well, I mean, being quiet's better than talking the entire time, but it's not the end of coaching. We're like, yeah, just be quiet. Because then literally there would be no purpose to coaching, right? Literally people could just talk to space, which would have value. Yeah, go ahead.
This is bringing up another surprising connection, surprising for me. Something that Srikala says regularly is that everything is two things. And he uses it in a, generally speaking, it's kind of a mindset hack. It's like when it looks like everything is falling apart and you just want to throw in the towel. I think every one of us that you and I and everyone that we're referring to and anyone that's listening has already had multiple experiences of knowing that the thing that happens after that is really powerful. And we end up feeling super grateful for those low moments. And so there's like, when we're in the moment of contrast, when things aren't going the way we want, if we remember that those moments are also opening, empowering, they're transformational, they're catalytic, then it shifts the feeling that I at least have on the inside, right? Then I don't have to freak out so much. It's like, well, this is also, yes, everything is going to shit, and also something else is happening here. I may not know what it is, but I know that that's true. And what you're talking about is reminding me of the practice of contact improvisation. And even some yoga where you're sort of like deliberately trying to do two seemingly impossible things at once. Reaching your hands into the floor and reaching your tail to the spine. You can't actually, I'm sorry, tail to the ceiling.
Yeah.
You can't actually maybe reach the ceiling or touch the center of the earth, but reaching those directions internally creates a different sensation. And so I really appreciate the way that you're talking about the complexity of spiritual life, spiritual practice, that it's not about when we think it's just one thing we're escaping or avoiding, there's something that we're missing.
Yeah, the old Zen quote is, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. And the idea is that anytime you think you've arrived at Buddhahood, or anytime you like think you've achieved an enlightened state, that is the very thing that has you, prevent you from going to the next place, right? And so there is just an invitation to always be the student, which is so hard. Our ego hates that. Just my ego hates that. Right? Just always the student. Just like, oh man, like when do I get front of the class, back of the class, front of the class, back of the class? Like, how do I just embrace that eternal cycle? Because I know that where I see people get stuck is they get stuck in the front of the class of whatever their classroom they've created for themselves. They get stuck there. And they're like, well, I know the thing to go to the next place is to get to the back of the class in this new area, but I I like being at the front of the class. I don't want to change. I don't want it to be different.
What is your current relationship to that? Like, where are you currently in the front of the class, and where are you in the back of the class? Where are you leading and where are you studying?
I mean, the place where I feel the most back in the class is in like romantic relationship, because I ended a very long-term romantic relationship and then went into this 9-month like no woman diet and no woman vision quest. And so now I'm like kind of stepping back out into that world, and I'm like, oh man, I have no idea how to do relationships the right way. Like I'm just like, I just don't. And to the point at which I've like, even a couple times a week, be like, I don't actually know if I'm capable of having an adult healthy relationship. Like I'm just not. Is that really possible for me? Like I've asserted that that's possible, but as I watch myself start to like, tiptoe back into like what dating's like and kind of being really present to the parts of me that are starting to show up, I'm like, man, this is a lot. There's a lot here, that feels undistinguished and unintegrated, and versus like, I definitely have moments of front and back of the class with coaching, but a lot more with coaching. I'm like, I know how to manage this relationship. I know how to create change here.
What do you think is like, both are such intimate relationships? What's the difference?
I'm much more practiced in not being driven by approval when it comes to coaching.
Huh.
So part of it is, and maybe this is like I think this might be some of the wisdom of like the pickup artist community, which I think is just such a weird and often very sleazy community, is that they do go into this practice of like, I'm just going to practice putting myself out there and accepting rejection. And in coaching, I've done a ton of that work, right? Because I mean, part of what you do when you build a coaching business is you propose, and you raise your rates, propose again, you get a bunch of no's, right? It's like kind of brutal, and you kind of like, I don't like this. But eventually you're like, oh, right, there's a thing I'm committed to beyond getting yes and no's and quoting a certain amount of money. Like there's a thing beyond that. But in romantic relationships, that's not a thing that I've done that much of. I've done a little bit of it, but it's not like I've gone out and done, the past 4 or 5 years of being coached, how many proposals have I given? How many pitches? And I've not nearly done that same kind of work in the realm of romantic relationships. I don't even know how I would exactly, but.
Right. Well, and I mean, as I'm listening to you, I'm very aware that I certainly haven't either. Although I have experienced, I would say the most painful, all but one of the most painful rejections that I've experienced in life have been romantic and not coaching. So I get that at some level. But I guess I'm also curious if you don't, I'm a little surprised that you don't feel like it transfers, even if it's just a little bit.
Oh, it definitely transfers.
Just not enough.
I mean, I don't know about not enough. It just has me feel at the back of the class in it is all. It's just a place where I'm just like, man, like, I mean, it's because it feels more complicated and more intimate.
Yeah.
And then our societal systems for mating are just pretty awful. Like I'm in a large amount of control over the system I use to create and invite and like go, like if I could completely control the whole process of how people mate in the world or have more control over it, right? Like it kind of, the nice thing about coaching at least is that most people don't have a lot of conventional knowledge of how it's supposed to go. So you can kind of just say like, well, this is how I'm going to do it. And people are like, most clients are like, okay, I'm down for that. But in dating, like there's a ton of like narrative baggage around this, right? And so I think that's the challenge.
Part of what I came up for me as I was listening, and I'm just curious, I have a feeling you're going to have a lot of insight around this. There's a tremendous amount of, well, actually, I'm about to say this, and I'm just realizing that I think that you and I are also we have different lenses on this too. So that's interesting. But anyway, in my lens, in my personal experience of coaching, part of what makes it less complex, although I don't think less intimate, but less complex, is that the roles are very clear. And actually part of what it sounds like even challenged you when you were working with Hans is that he was engaged in a behavior that had you slightly confused about the roles for a moment.
Yeah.
and then you got clear, and then you were good again. And it shifted your perception of what that role could mean, but not the perception that you had distinct roles, client and coach. At this time in at least American culture, there is not, and maybe there's some truth to this in general, but I think particularly like 2020, 2021, we're at a time where there is not this clarity between men and women or any gender in a dating context. There's so much more that has to be negotiated because those roles could be identical. The way that they're different don't necessarily fit under the names girlfriend, boyfriend, or boyfriend, boyfriend, or partner, partner. Like there are not these frames at this time, for better and for worse. Like we've created this society that doesn't have those clear roles. We did that on purpose. But now here we are without a bunch of clear roles, and it makes it much, much more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I think on top of that, I got very clear on the kind of role I was consistently playing in my romantic relationships. And so now, I mean, I often play the role of sort of like, so at first I was like the rescuer, and then I was sort of like the prisoner. Like that's a pretty typical relationship pattern for me of like, I'll come and protect you and save you and do stuff for you. And then of course, like at a certain period of time, like now you're not giving back to me because I've set myself as the rescuer, so they're the victim. And I'm like, and I want you to be giving to me, but you're not. I haven't set up the relationship that way. So now I'm just like a prisoner to this relationship, and I can't get out. And so that's a pattern that's shown up in a lot of my relationships. Now I want to be super clear: the women I were with probably did not need to be rescued, nor were they. I'm not sure they even experienced me as being helpful when I was rescuing them, but that sort of was my experience of it. And then, so there's this question as I step out and back out into the world of like being really present to that pattern and how that's was not a pattern that was good for me or for my partners. And so in the midst of that, the sort of societal ambiguity about romantic relationship, I'm also like stepping into like well, how do I relate to, if I'm not rescuing people, okay, what does that mean? Because, at least when I was rescuing, I knew what the role was.
Yep.
Right? I knew what my job was. I'm, supposed to come in and take care of everything and make everything simple and not have any needs and just like be who you need me to be. And so now it's like, okay, well, how do I do that differently? And I think I'm doing it differently, but it's a little like, I've been playing like Horatio this for like years. So now it's like, okay, now play Hamlet, play the ghost, right? Play, I was playing Lady Macbeth, right? And now I'm playing Macbeth. It's just like whoa, this worldview of this person's totally different, and their motivations are different, and there's still a really strong gravitational pull back to that old role.
Yes. This is a great metaphor. Like, because actually, as I was listening to you, I felt like, well, I do think that the roles are not explicit, and that makes it more difficult. But you're right that these very nuanced personal roles that come from programs and old, like unconscious patterns, they do exist. They're in all of us. And I do think that I drew this picture as I was listening to you. I do think that we magnetize people that kind of match us.
Yeah.
I do not mean that complete us. I want to be really clear. This is not a picture to represent completion. This is just like, whatever shape we have, we find people who work with that shape. And so when you're playing Lady Macbeth, inevitably, I expect that you are attracting someone from that world, right? They're participating. Y'all are in the same play. But then as I was listening to you, I also wondered, I wonder what happens when you're actually not in the play. That's probably where a lot of I'm thinking about me and Tree, we get into a lot of conflict these days, as I think he's shifted plays. He's like, I'm not playing in Hamlet anymore. I'm in Richard III now. Are you gonna get with me, or are you gonna keep playing in the Hamlet show?
Yeah, so I drew this picture.
Yes, please.
can see it as well. So I
Yes,
feel
I
like
love
there's
this.
just like a little place where we do find that connection, but there's actually like all this other stuff going on. And we just tend to pay attention to this little part right here. Right. And
Yes.
so I think it doesn't like, I mean, no one completes you, right? But yeah, I think there is that natural tension there. And then I also think there's a question of like, well, how is it supposed to feel? Because in a way, like when it feels right to me, I'm probably more likely than not playing some old role, right? Because that's what
Yes.
feels familiar. And so it's almost like, how do I even discern anymore who's a good partner for me? Because if it feels in the way that it's felt before, that probably is
Yeah.
an indication that it's the same old pattern versus like in the same way that like with Hans, it was so powerful. That coaching relationship was like, it felt weird. I was like, this is not what a coach is not supposed to do this, right? But it elevated my understanding of what the coach relationship could be. And so
Mm.
that's where it can be really tricky, like it's sort of like, I don't know quite, yeah, I don't know how to judge whether someone's a good match or not. I can sort of look on paper to see like, there's some very like, tactical stuff that I'm very clear about. Like, I want someone who wants to have kids and there's a certain kind of lifestyle I want to live. And I'm Buddhist. So if they were like super religious and were against Buddhist, that wouldn't, there's some like basic stuff. But beyond that, so much of like romance and partnership is this kind of, it's this in this feeling intuitive space. And so then
Hmm.
what do you do when you're like, a big chunk of your intuition is based on this old pattern? How
Mm.
do you know what's a match or not anymore? And so
Yeah.
it just ends up leaving me feel very kind of like ungrounded and uncertain. And then where I go when I'm feeling super, one of the places I go when I'm feeling ungrounded and uncertain is, well, it's hopeless, I should just give up. That's a sort of defense mechanism I have. So that's why I kind of go to like, well, am I ever going to have a healthy relationship? Because I don't even know how to do this, right? And in reality, probably, this is what I would tell my clients. The fact that I feel so ungrounded is actually an indication of my growth, not an
Hmm.
indication of my stuckness. But I don't
Yeah.
want it to feel like that. I want it to feel like I'm right and I know what I'm doing. But growth doesn't always feel like that at first. So
No, it's probably not ever feeling that way.
yeah.
It's a beautiful insight. You're such a deep thinker, such a deep researcher and inquirer.
Thank you.
I think that this is also, I mean, I hear a lot of language that resonates with different parts of me as you're talking, and because you're saying it and I'm not, I can also see that I'm like, oh yeah, of course, it's like very judgmental. Like, what the fuck does it mean to be in right relationship? As I said that, I'm like, that's a Buddhist concept. There is actually a definition of that, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking, like, what do you value? And so then it comes back to the kind of the conversation we were having before. It's like, well, what do you value? Your follow through and your show up at the yes, of course. Yes, we both do. Do you value it at the expense of your personal joy and fulfillment? No, you don't. I know that about you. If at any point you realize like, this is out of integrity for me, I don't actually want to be doing this, I don't want to be working with this client, or I don't want to be in this relationship, you would change it. You would make that, you would line it up. And so what I hear you saying is that you're as you reopen your relationship world, your intimate partnership, romantic kind of relationship world, you're reevaluating and upgrading and gradually kind of tuning, refining what your values actually are in this space. And that part of what's uncomfortable is how many of those values you're questioning. That you're like, I thought that was important, but I'm no longer sure. And it's uncomfortable, I think, anytime we let go, particularly of something that we've held like any kind of identification with. So uncomfortable to live life without that.
Yeah, I mean, the value that I've been thinking about the most recently that has been a bit of my grounding has been this concept of emotional sobriety. Like, how sober am I getting into this relationship? And I think that that's a bit of the challenge, because I think for a long time, the way I defined falling in love was a bit like getting drunk,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's always this question to me, like, how much drunkenness can I allow? Because there is like something very intoxicating about love, which I wouldn't want to lose. It wouldn't be like, go out and like, all right, does she match my spreadsheet criteria? Okay, great, we should fall in love. Like, that's not, there has to be some expansiveness in the space. But what level of expansiveness is sort of is still in the realm of sobriety, where there's excitement, but I'm still grounded, right? There's still like kind of
Yeah.
like you said before, like how can I be reaching the part of me that is romantic up to the ceiling while also reaching the part of me that's sober into the ground, right? How can I do those two things at the
Yeah.
same time?
Yes. When I was 21, maybe 21, I got like my third or maybe even it was probably fourth, like deep, deep heartbreak,
Hmm.
kind of back to back.
Hmm.
And I could, and then I had like a little sort of tentative toe in the water and got like deeply crushed again. Now I'm like, oh no, it was 5. So like really crushed. And at that time, I kind of made this very practical. It was coming a lot from what you're saying. And I made a decision to just kind of like create a little distance from my body. I was like, my body keeps getting me into these situations. Like I have been trusting that when my body feels this particular turn on, that is the indication of this being a fit. And that's clearly not true. So let me see. And I didn't really have a lot of nuance at that time. And so I did really kind of go to the opposite extreme and ended up in a relationship where I didn't have a whole lot of turn on, probably because I had I was suppressing that part, but also because I chose this person because I didn't feel it with him. I felt safe. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna destroy myself. And we were in partnership for 4 years. I was just talking about him yesterday with Shri. I love him. I wish he was more a part of my life. Like this person, we're soulmates, brothers and sisters and besties and family in some other world. And I think that for a long, maybe even until now, talking to you, I kind of vilified that choice. But what I see now is like, that's what I needed at that time. And I didn't get stuck there. No, I reopened. Whatever needed reopening came back. And the shutting down that I did wasn't just a trauma response. It probably was also that, but it was also really like brilliant. Like, I'm missing something. Like everything is 2 things. There's more going on here. And I'm so blinded by this one thing. Let me kind of see if can I get my eyes on anything else? Because man, when that turn on thing kicks, it's like, I am lost, you know? And so now, it's almost 20 years later, and I can really say I feel much more integrated, and there's still more. But I think that that's also a really valuable transmission to give myself retroactively, to speak out loud with you, that it's like, it's not a right now or never thing. This growth thing that we're doing. You're not being tested and assessed based on your ability to do this perfectly right this second. And so what if you miss the mark a little bit? Like, so what if you go to one extreme? You, Toku, of all people, you will find your balance. I have no doubt.
So much easier to not have doubt for other people, though. That's my experience. I have lots of people I'm like, I have no doubt they're going to figure this thing out, but not having doubt for yourself there's a lot more at stake for me. I think there's a lot more at stake at me for me than it is for you for me. If that makes any sense.
Well, and I mean, I understand, of course.
Yeah.
It makes it easier for me to say it first, maybe. But I think as soon as you hear me say it, you also can, it's like, that's what we do for each other.
I mean, the grounded Buddha part of me like gets that, but there's a very animalistic part of me that, struggles to let go of survival as a foundational instinct. And I think that's so tricky, right? I mean, that's part of anytime we do this deep work, part of that deep work is tending to taming, loving, being compassionate with the wild animal in each of us. And nothing brings up my wild animal more than a romantic relationship. I mean, both in like good and bad ways, right? Like I'm sure that many of my former partners would have described wild animal moments of me that they deeply enjoyed, and moments of me being a wild animal they did not enjoy. And I have that same experience with myself. And so it's, yeah, I mean, like, I'm like, yeah, of course I'll figure that out. Like, how could I not figure that out? And the wild enemy in me, especially the wild enemy that got really hurt in my last relationship, is very cautious, right? Almost like I had a friend who had a dog that was just scared of all men. Didn't matter how nice the men were, but like that's just the way he was. And right, it gave me a lot of context for like, yeah, I can know that this will be okay, and I can know this risk is there, but I can't do it while disregarding that wild animal. It doesn't work.
Truth. In this context, or in any context, how did you define success in a way that you were wrong? And how do you define it now in a way that you believe to be truer? Like, how has your relationship to success changed in romantic relationship and or business and or life?
Yeah, romantic relationship is probably harder for me to define because it's very amorphous right now. I mean, I think in the past I probably would have defined success in a romantic relationship as like getting the hottest, coolest partner I possibly can. Right.
Hot and cool.
Hot and cool. Yeah, I mean, there's probably more to it than that, but those are like, yeah, who's the hottest, coolest person I can get? I still would like someone who's hot and cool, but it's not based upon like a. Yeah, I wrote a little thing about this, like the game of dating from approval versus the game of dating from contribution. That I really want to play the game of dating from contribution. It is super hard. Like there's a ton of stuff wired in my system to ignore that way of playing the game. So
what does that game mean?
Can I look at my notes?
Yes.
Because I wrote about this. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Because I wrote a thing about this. 2 ways to play dating. I really should publish this as an article at some point.
Yes, please.
Okay, so the game of dating for approval has 4 objectives. Get the best partner possible. Best means the most attractive, successful, desirable, enviable, and who has a good personality. Match is secondary. It's important, but it's a secondary thing. And the match needs to be good enough only for a baseline level of enjoyment, right? So match is sort of like, you want to just get just enough match so like you can kind of like basically enjoy it. And the most important thing is just like how attractive, successful, desirable, enviable, and of a quality personality this person has. So that's the primary objective from approval. The rules of dating from approval are, when you're going on a date, the primary question is, do they like me? The secondary question is, are they good enough for me? And the third question is, can I obtain them? Dating is primarily about 2 things: meeting people as assessing their desirability, both personally and in the imagined minds of others. 2, making or presenting yourself in such a way that you're desirable to as many people as possible, thus increasing your odds of attracting the highest value partner. Failure is when you fail at a date because you fail to get approval. Failure indicates a decrease in your perceived value in the marketplace. Failure constitutes not getting asked out for a second date, or you and your date not having a good time. And I could go deep more. I have a bunch of notes on sex and love. I don't know if I go quite deeply into that, but we can talk about that in a minute if you want to. So then,
you feel like the approval paradigm came out of you reflecting on how you used to approach relationships.
It came out of reflecting on how I think most people approach relationship, if they're really honest with themselves. I think that's actually the dominant. It is actually the dominant paradigm in our society. And I think I was highly ascribed to that paradigm. I think there's ways in which I pushed against it, right? Like, do I need someone who, has this size breasts and this kind of ass? Like, can I stretch that expansiveness, right? So I think I was pushed against the edges of it, but on some baseline level, that's still my way of thinking. So then I was like, I'm gonna invent a new way of playing it. So here's the idea of inventing a game of dating based on contribution. So the goal of this way of dating is to be a contribution to everyone you date until you find someone who seems like a person you can create a stable, healthy adult relationship with. Then to spend enough time with that person to get to know them until you're ready to make a commitment to them. So that's the main objective. Dating is primarily about meeting people as an experience of getting to know who they are with an open mind and genuine curiosity. making and presenting yourself as you truly are with the intention to put your best self forward. The rules of this form of dating is everyone is worthy of love. Anyone you spend time with gets your full attention. You contribute to each person that you go on a date with. Mostly your focus is on having fun, enjoying people, and getting to know them. You can be as honest as possible so long as it's kind, skillful, and not designed to create intimacy unnaturally, and love yourself no matter what happens. The primary question is, do I like them and do I enjoy spending time with them? Am I a contribution to everyone I spend time with? How can I be okay with people not wanting to spend time with me? If someone doesn't want to spend time with me, it's mostly about them. While feedback may be helpful, it actually reveals a set of underlying preferences and tastes which were developed outside of my control and may exist entirely in them playing the first kind of game. It's okay to feel sad or bad about someone not spending time with you. It's also okay for people to not want to spend time with you. It's helpful to put your focus on people who you do want to spend time with and the contribution you are to them. Failure only happens in three ways. One, you change yourself to make yourself more appealing to someone else. Small changes such as dressing up is sort of okay. Deception, performing, or any kind of formal manipulation or manufacturing is not. You fail to focus on being a contribution to people you spend time with. You stop loving yourself because someone doesn't want to spend time with you or doesn't return your love.
This is really, really fascinating. I love that you shared this. I feel like it's totally possible that up until now, I've been assuming everyone is already loving you as much as I do, already knowing you as much as I do, already feeling you as much as I do. And on the off chance that I was wrong about that, that just got everybody up to speed.
Yeah, some people do not love me, and that's okay.
I have only one question. Like, everything about this feels so liberating. The new paradigm is so powerful, and your deep thinking about this is so satisfying to hear about. I am questioning only the one thing, which is the premise that there needs to be failure in the new paradigm. And or maybe a more precise version of the question is like, how do you look at the truth of your failure in the new paradigm without going into a self-attack or shame cycle as you look at it?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I was thinking very much of it in the realm of like, in games, you win or you lose. And so what does winning and losing look like in this game? And losing looks like basically these three things, which is different, right? Losing looks something very different from approval. Yeah, I mean, it's probably not a very well designed semantically. It does not point people to be inspired by their lack of success or their breaking of the rules.
This is also kind of fun because, first of all, I'm curious about the distinction between failure and losing. I've been watching a lot of sports dramas lately. Not actual sports. I'm not particularly into actual sports, but TV shows and movies about sports I'm really into. And they lose all the time.
I always cry in movies about sports.
Yeah, they're so moving.
Yeah.
They're like, you get your like intensity and people working to create something and they're bonding together always. And there's always an inspirational coach or mentor who's bringing the team together. And then they whatever. It's recipe for awesomeness. But loss is not necessarily failure in that context. And I've actually found it really fruitful. There's something there for me because I think academically it's different. Like in an academic context, which is much more my history, it's really not okay to fail. But in a sport context, it's inevitable in some way. You're not going to be able to win every single game or every single competition. And what we do with it. So even just hearing you shift that, like as you named it a game and talked about winning and losing versus succeeding and failing, it felt different to me.
Yeah, I think I'm torn about this sometimes. I mean, there is like a classic collapse of performance and morality that I think happens, which is like, I think there's value in saying like, well, I got to know, like,
Yeah.
if I talked to the client, they didn't hire me. Like I could be like, well, they didn't really say no. I'm like, no, they said no. Like that. That's important for me to
sure.
like make that distinction, right?
Yes.
And at the same time, like I think if you collapse forms from reality, I failed or I lost, and that means I'm a failure or a loser, right? That's problematic. I think that's the place where things get sticky for people. That distinction between performance and morality. So
Well, and I mean, that's part of what I think you've done so beautifully in the new system is that it's the lack of alignment with yourself, care for yourself, devotion to your own heart authentically that determines failure, as opposed to someone else saying no, which, like, what planet did y'all think we came here to? Like, people say no all the damn time. So yeah, I think that it's true that I make my choices. I can feel the reason I like your second system better for me personally than your first one. The approval I like less than the, what's the second word? Contribution. Is it's not moral, although I could justify it morally. It's not academic, although I could justify it academically. It's because it feels freer. It feels better. It feels more satisfying, more liberating, more relief. There's more relief over there. So I'm aware that that's the underlying current that I'm realizing about myself throughout our deep conversation today, is that that's my value system that I'm prioritizing in my life and in my relationships, that I am here for more freedom for myself and for you in this case, and everyone that's listening to us.
Does the pursuit of freedom ever become a trap?
Yeah, I mean, I as I hear you say that, I immediately thought of your story about the Buddha. It's another one of those, I have a tremendously long history in improvisation. And in improvisation, we're always practicing impossible things. They're never ever things that we can do. So I think that I have a particular comfort that may be unusual in saying yes to a practice that by definition is never gonna end or get someplace.
Yeah.
But that creates a new state, or that opens up new possibilities, or that is, anyway, even if whether there's a trap or not, I don't know that I know the answer to that. I don't always feel free.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes, this is something that shows up for me with clients sometimes, is the ultimate form of freedom that you could be in solitary confinement but feel completely free? Or is the ultimate freedom like truly being able to do whatever you want, being like Jeff Bezos, but also like incredibly conscious? I mean, I don't actually know if Jeff Bezos is he does not present as being incredibly conscious, but I don't know him personally, so he could be, and I just don't know. But like having sort of like the ultimate type of freedom. And this shows up a lot often when I'm coaching people who want to I want to leave my job. And I'm like, I'm supporting you leaving your job. And at the same time, I also will watch those people over the years, and they just get a new job and then recreate the exact set of circumstances that had them feel trapped. And so I think that's also like a question for me always about like, what is, how to, I think the not arriving thing that you're pointing to is sort of the secret shortcut to that. But that's also a question that comes with me a lot, that tension.
Yeah. Well, and there again, there's the inside outside alignment. If we have a problem that we're experiencing externally, chances are we're experiencing something internally. If we only solve the external problem, then the internal problem will creep back in. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's like, well, then we do that A/B testing and we realize like, oh, it's not just the job. I've totally had moments. It's rare. I will say that I feel liberated and in love with my work in a way that I did not as a teacher. But there are still times when I find myself overworking and like taking on overworking emotionally and physically in exactly the way that I did as a teacher. And I'm better at catching those moments. But the fact that I've changed careers, I now run my own business and I'm my own boss, doesn't make it, there's no guarantees. There's no guarantees.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it's definitely an ongoing practice. And my therapist said to me recently, she goes, having a job that you truly love is like the unicorn of life. Talk about unicorn companies. But the truth is most people don't really like what they do and are very, very resigned to it. And so, and I do feel incredibly blessed that I fought fucking hard to figure out what I was supposed to do. 30 jobs till I was 30 years old. I lived in a monastery. I mean, I just tried so many different things. And then when I finally found coaching, I was like, okay, yeah, this is it. This is my jam. And so, yeah, I feel incredibly lucky that I get to be a coach. And I still have times where I'm like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. And my clients are being wacky. I'm like, oh God, I just want to get rid of all of them. And, because it's just, that's just humanity and suffering in life. And so that's going to show up no matter what you do, no matter how good it is, even the most beautiful woman in the world gets a pimple. So.
Fucking hell. I know. I'm like, would you like to see I'm 40. They told me this was going to stop after I was like 16. What anyway. I'm not the most beautiful woman in the world and I have pimples and I'm still pissed about it from time to time. So.
Sorry about that.
Toku, where can people find you? What's those people that have heard you that are just like soaking up the nectar of your wisdom? What's the best next thing for them?
Well, if you're a coach and you want to kind of fall in love with coaching in the same way I'm in love with it, then you can go to the samuraicoachingdojo.com. I'm actually writing and publishing a book on coaching it's a coaching devotional. I'm going to have it out by the 1st of, I don't know when this is coming out, but the 1st of January, I'll have it out. And if anyone wants a free copy of that, I'm going to give anybody who's your listener a free copy of that book.
I love that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And I follow you on Facebook. I feel like that's a really good social platform for people who want to just kind of like read your musings. Is that totally a good place?
Yeah. Facebook's a great place, and feel free to shoot me a Facebook message. I'm a little slower to respond to Facebook messages than email, but I'm happy to answer questions about life, and people want to hop on the phone and jam about something. I'm very open. I just love talking to people. So.
Well, I love talking to you.
Thank you, Jesse. I love talking to you too.
This is a real pleasure. How can we help? This is the last question of this. If there was one thing that everyone that listened to this could do that would you'd be like, oh, that was fucking awesome. Thanks, team.
For me or for the world, or what's the context?
Well, it's your request. You can apply it wherever you want.
Okay, so I have 2 requests. I'll start my first request, which is for the world. So everyone who's listening, this is my Buddha request. So my Buddha request is just like, really, whatever your life is, really just fucking appreciate it and get how precious it is. Like, it just like, I mean, like, I'm going to be 40 in February. What happened? Like, what happened the last 40 years of my life? Where is it? Because I don't see it anywhere. So please, 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 even if you're just like, you hate your life and you hate your wife or husband or partner, just like find some way to like appreciate that preciousness for a moment. And then, if anybody knows my future wife and wants to introduce me to them, I'm available for introductions as well. So.
Amazing, Toku. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.
And thanks y'all for listening. Leave your comments in the comments. Tell us what landed. Reach out to us. We'll make sure that you get whatever resource you need. And we just like to hear from you, whatever it is that, we went really deep today, shared a lot of our hearts. So we want to hear from yours. Everything you want already.